So today's topic of discussion is water pollution, its causes, its sources, its effects and its consequences. So let us see in detail what are the different aspects of water pollution. Before learning water pollution, you need to know certain basic things. That is, after reading these slides, what you will learn. First, you will learn the key terminologies which are related with water pollution. Second, you will get to know the different types of water pollution, like whether it is groundwater pollution, which is affecting our groundwater, or whether it is the major surface water pollution, which affects our surface water. Next, you will get to know what are the human activities that is being done or practiced due to which the extent of water pollution is increasing and what are its effects on our daily life. That is how human activities is affecting the physical, chemical and the biological characteristics of the water and thus causing water pollution. Let us So, what all things are there in this particular presentation? First, definition of water pollution. Next, there will be sources of water pollution. In that, we'll get to see what is groundwater pollution, what is surface water pollution. Then, we'll get to know the effects of water pollution and the control measures for water pollution. And next, we will study about bioaccumulation or which is an effect due to a thermal pollution because bioaccumulation and thermal pollution are some way or the other related with each other. Let us start with the introduction slide first. So, before we start learning about water pollution, we have to understand why water is very, very useful. So, if we consider our day-to-day activities like drinking, cooking, bathing, washing, irrigation, or even in industries, water is the most essential solvent, right? In fact, if we see in our human body also, 70% of the liquid is water. So you can understand what is the importance of water. But there is a very special characteristic of water, that is it has the ability that it is a very good solvent. Therefore, it can dissolve any kind of polar or non-polar, that is inorganic or organic pollutants, and therefore the extent of pollution of water is very, very easy. You can see the diagram and the two terminologies which are written here, that is point sources and non-point sources. Now in the next slide, before we go and study the point and non-point sources, we need to see this diagram. Just see this diagram. In this diagram, you can see that what are the different activities of the human beings for which they need water and how those activities itself is polluting water. Now, in next slide, see the point and non-point sources. Now, as the name suggests, what are point sources? Point sources are specific sites near the water bodies from where directly the pollutants or the effluents get discharged into the water bodies, right? That is point. That is from a particular point, the large amount of industrial pollutants are getting inserted into your water bodies. What are the example of point sources? The examples, as you can see, are industries, power plants, underground coal mines, then oil offshores. Why? Because from the oil wells, once there is spillage of water or spillage of oil from this, that can affect the water bodies, right? Next comes the non-point sources. If you see non-point sources, what do you mean by this? Non-point sources means the sources that are scattered. Okay, that is, it is not a particular point from where the contaminants or the effluents are getting discharged. In fact, they are scattered or they are collectively present over a large amount of area. But when they are combined together or they are collectively identified, then they are considered as a single non-point source. For example, surface runoff from the agriculture fields. Now, agriculture fields are scattered all over the area, right? But when we are talking of pollution in water due to the surface runoff from these agriculture fields, then together that agriculture field will be considered as a single non-point source. Next, overflowing of the drains. Now again, drains can be scattered, they can be present in any areas, but when we are considering the pollution due to drains, then we are considering those drains as a single non-point source. Third, water sweeping from the roads or from the fields. They are also a major cause of water pollution, right? In this figure, you can see there are different types of sources which have been categorized both as point sources. As you can see here, these all are point sources, and this is the non-point sources. So as you have seen, non-point sources are scattered ones and point sources are the point ones. That is, from a single source the water is getting polluted. Let us see the next slide. Now, I have mentioned there are two types of water pollution, that is groundwater pollution and surface water pollution. Now, as the surface water pollution is the major cause of water pollution today all over the world, so we need to know what are the major sources of water pollution. Why? Because until and unless we get to know the sources of water pollution, we cannot adopt the suitable control measures to stop them. First is sewage. Sewage means drainage. So any sewage or any type of drains from where the bad water or the dirty water gets poured into the fresh water bodies, that is seas and ocean, that is a source of surface water pollution. Next, industrial effluents. I have already told you industries are a major source of water pollution because different types of toxic chemicals, acids, alkali, metallic salts, volatile organic carbons, and in fact the radioactive substances sometimes from the nuclear power plants are the major sources of water pollution. Next, synthetic detergents. So I think you all have seen in villages what happens. People do these washing and bathing type of activities near the water bodies. Now, the foam that is formed from these soaps and detergents, where are they going? They are mixing into the water bodies. Now, those detergents consist of large fatty acids, which does not get degraded. So what happens? They get decomposed into the water bodies and causes the formation of algal bloom. I don't know how many of you have seen Yamuna. If you see many a times in Yamuna, you'll get to see that there is a formation of white foams or there is algal growth. Why that is there? Because of many types of water pollution. Next source of surface water pollution is agrochemicals. What are agrochemicals? The chemicals such as fertilizers and pesticides which are used in agriculture are major source of water pollution. Why? Because those fertilizers consist of nitrates, phosphates, and in fact, if I specifically talk of pesticides, they consist of insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides. So what happens? All these insecticides and pesticides undergoes runoff from different areas. What happens? They ultimately get poured into the water bodies and they affect our water bodies. Not only this, whenever there is heavy rainfall or snowfall in hilly areas, what happens is large amount of pollutants which are otherwise deposited on the land surfaces, they get passed from the water and then they enter into seas and oceans, right? The next source of water pollution is oil spillage. What happens in oil spillage? Now, whenever there are oil drilling plants or there are industries, what happens? There is sudden spillage of oil from those industries. Now, once that oil reaches the seas and the oceans, they affect our water bodies, right? Now, after learning about the sources and the causes of water pollution, and specifically the surface water pollution, which is the major cause of water pollution in world, we have to study what are the impacts or effects of those water pollution, how it is affecting our human health. First, oxygen demanding waste. Now, what do you mean by this terminology is uh, different types of waste products reaches to our water bodies, right? Some of them could be biodegradable and some of them could be non-biodegradable. Now, what do you mean by biodegradable waste? Biodegradable waste are those which can be broken down into smaller substances which get easily dissolved in water and do not cause harm. But the problem is that when these biodegradable waste reaches to our water bodies, they require huge amount of oxygen. Right. Now, where from they will get this oxygen? They cannot, the waste products which are present in water, they cannot extract all the oxygen from the atmosphere. Now, where from they will take up this oxygen? They will take up the dissolved oxygen. That is, I think you all must have studied in class 12. That is, in our water bodies, we have something called as dissolved oxygen. What do you mean by dissolved oxygen? It is simply the oxygen that is solubilized in the water bodies. Now, all types of biodegradable waste which are present in the water bodies, they use up those oxygen. Now, see, there was a fixed amount of oxygen which was dissolved in water bodies. Now, what is happening is all the waste products which are reaching to those water bodies, they are taking up that oxygen. That is, in a way, they are extracting that useful oxygen. So, the aquatic flora and fauna, that is the plants and animals which are present in the water bodies, they are not getting that oxygen because water content is very less, right? So what is happening, the oxygen demanding waste is very harmful for water bodies. Next is nitrogen and phosphorus compounds. Now, most of the fertilizers and the pesticides which are there in the agricultural fields, they contain nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, nitrogen and phosphorus, they are harmful, but when they are present in fertilizers and in pesticides. But when they reaches to the water bodies, they get converted into their atomic forms, that is the single nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, these elements are important macronutrients both for human beings as well as aquatic life. So what is happening, because of this nitrogen and phosphorus, large amount of algal bloom is formed over the water bodies. That is also known as eutrophication. I don't know whether you have seen in river waters, that is the most recent example is in Yamuna. You will see in certain part of in some part, what happens is you will see a green color of algal bloom gets formed. Now, why that is getting formed? Because the excessive use of nitrogen and phosphorus containing agriculture and pesticides in the agricultural fields comes down to those water bodies due to the surface runoff. Now, when they reaches those water bodies, they are taken up by those algal bloom, and due to which they spread over the water bodies. So what is happening? Whenever there is an algal bloom over your water body, they'll stop the penetration of sunlight into the water bodies. Now, what is happening? The aquatic plants and animals are not getting the sunlight. So just like human beings, we need sunlight, they also need sunlight for their survival. So this is the second harmful effect of your water pollution. Third is pathogens. What do you mean by pathogens? They are disease causing microorganisms. Now you can see different types of drain and sewage water, right? From our washrooms or from the municipal waste products, they are reaching into seas and oceans. Now they contain harmful bacteria and viruses, which are known as pathogens. What does it do is, whenever those type of water by mistake is used for the drinking purposes, they are responsible for causing the diseases such as cholera, dysentery, typhoid, jaundice, right? Therefore, this is the third harmful effect of water pollution. Then the last impact and effect of water pollution is the toxic compounds. Now, toxic compounds not only include the pathogens, they include heavy metals. What are there in heavy metals? Arsenic, cadmium, mercury. These are all heavy metals. When they reaches the water bodies, they not only affect the fishes, but the human beings, when we consume those fishes, it also affects our health, right? Apart from these, there is also release of harmful organic compounds, which are very harmful for the human life. All of you, please see this animated video. Why we are showing you this animated video? Because this will help you in understanding in a better way that how the water pollution and how our activity is related with each other. That is how the different types of point and non-point sources which are created by human beings itself is affecting the water bodies. Let us see this video. So, causes and effects of water pollution. So, water comes on the earth's surface due to precipitation, right? But at the same time, that water is getting polluted due to our activities. What are those activities? See, these are the different types of point and non-point sources that will be shown to you one by one. That is industries, power plants, they are affecting water bodies. Not only they are polluting them, but also increasing their temperatures. Next is deforestation. Of course, if you are cutting the trees daily, what does it do? The roots of the trees are lost and therefore there is loss of very important microbes. Next is excessive use of agrochemicals, that is pesticides and fertilizers on agricultural fields. And the last is the oil spillage. You know that there are oil drilling machines and also there are ships from where there is always a chance of leakage of water. Now that causes the death of not only animals but they increases the water pollution which affects the human health in our daily life, right? So that is how it shows that you can see a simple fresh water body due to these different types of point and non-point sources is getting affected on daily basis. Among the different types of control measures, first is the judicious use of agriculture, that is the pesticides and fertilizers. Now, students, it is not that we can completely avoid pesticides and fertilizers because nowadays they have become very, very important for increasing the agricultural growth. But what we can do, we can judiciously use those pesticides and fertilizers so that if there is excessive amount of fertilizer, they does not get deposit on the surfaces of the agriculture fields and they do not undergo surface runoff to affect the water bodies, right? So we should use only that much which is useful for the agriculture fields. Next, it also helps in avoiding leaching. What is leaching? See, in fertilizers and pesticides, apart from important nutrients, you have some heavy metals also. Now, if large amount of that get settled over the agriculture fields, what happens is many poisonous heavy metals percolate down into the soil, that is known as leaching. Now that is also very, very harmful for our groundwater, right? That causes groundwater pollution. Next, we should use nitrogen fixing plants instead of these artificial fertilizers. What are nitrogen fixing plants? Now, there are certain plants whose roots have the capacity that they can extract the nitrogen from their environment and can accumulate them at a certain place. So it is always suggested to the farmers that they can grow such nitrogen fixing plants in between their crops so that what it does is it increases the concentration of nitrogen for those crops. So they do not need the excessive use of fertilizers. Third is important pest management system. Now, awareness of pest management system is very important because in environmental science, it is not only that you should know about the resources, you should also know how to dispose of the resources because excessive resources are also somewhere or the other responsible for causing pollution. Just take the example of pesticides. Suppose you have applied pesticides on the agriculture fields, okay? Now, once the requisite amount of pesticides have been taken up by the water, the extra pesticides, how we can use the technology to dispose of that extra pesticide without affecting water, that we need to know. Therefore, nowadays, even environmental science have become very, very important part of engineering. Next part is to prevent runoff. Why? Because in runoff, not only the pollutants reaches the seas and water, oceans, but many a times the top layer, as I have told you in the last session, that the top layer is very much enriched in the important macro and micronutrients. Now, if excessive runoff takes place, what happens is the important nutrients also goes away from the agriculture fields. That is also not good for the agriculture field and also it increases the water pollution. Fifth and the most important thing, specifically in cities, there has to be proper drainage and sewage system. Why? Because due to these overflowing of the sewage and drainage water, what is happening? Our fresh water bodies is getting affected, and we get our daily water from these fresh water bodies. So we have to stop this overflowing of drainage and sewage system. Last and most important is afforestation. What do you mean by afforestation? Afforestation means planting of trees. Now, how this helps? See, if there are more trees, then the roots of the trees have the capacity that they can hold back the nutrients, right? And in fact, the water also. So, in a way, they decreases the runoff. So, if in an area you have large number of trees and forests, then what does it do? It holds that water and does not allow the runoff or the loss of important nutrients into the water bodies. So, these are all the specific control measures that we should take up to stop the water pollution. One of the most important terminology that you should know as students is the bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Now, why we are reading it separately? Because after studying all the effects and impacts of water pollution, we need to know about bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Let us first see the definition. Now, there are different types of pesticides and fertilizers which reaches water bodies, which we have already studied. Now, they are also responsible for the deposit of harmful heavy metals such as mercury. Now, you should know mercury, when reaches to water bodies, they get converted into methyl mercury, which is very, very harmful, right? And this was one of the major nutrient which was responsible for causing the Minamata disease, which happened in Japan due to the mercury poisoning. Not only this, apart from methyl mercury, there is a very popular pesticide which is very much in use, that is known as DDT. Now, what happens? All these pesticides consist of harmful toxic chemicals, right? And moreover, they are not water soluble. That is the most deadly part. Now, as they are not water soluble, what happens is they get accumulated in the environment. Here also, this is not the end. Moreover, they have high affinity for body lipids. Body lipids means the fats and different types of cholesterol molecules which are present in our body. They have the attraction for these types of pesticides. So what happens when they get accumulated in the environment? From there, as they have got special affinity for our body fluids, they get inside into our human bodies and accumulate there. So this particular phenomena is known as bioaccumulation. But over the period of time, when these large amount of chemicals get deposited for a long time in our body, they causes the magnification of the extent of toxicity in our body, which is named as biomagnification. Now here you can see how, as the DDT concentration in ppm, that is in parts per million, when it is increasing from this level to this level, you can see from water how different types of organisms is getting affected, right? As the concentration increases from aquatic zooplankton, it affects the fishes and ultimately it reaches the birds. And in fact, in extreme cases, it is very, very deadly for the human beings.